Hello everybody, welcome to IA Command, your #1 source for Imperial strategy content in 2022 and beyond. In this video we're going to be taking a look at something that I think a lot of you have been waiting for ever since I did my first tier list video for campaign. We're going to be taking a look at Imperial deployment cards and ranking each of them, including the mercenary cards. So basically any of the generic deployments that the Empire player can deploy during the campaign. We're going to be taking a look at all of them and ranking each of them based on a tier system, S through D. And we'll go over that in just a second, but I just want to remind everybody, if you enjoyed this type of Imperial Assault YouTube content and want to support the channel, be sure to check out my Patreon, patreon.com/iacommand. All donations are extremely appreciated. Definitely helps me motivate me to keep going with the channel and keep making content for you all. So anyway, let's get into it. This is gonna be might be a long video. There's a lot, as you can tell. There's a lot of these deployment cards from the last few expansions. So this is going to be just looking at vanilla content. This is not IACP or anything like that. It's interesting and fun if you want to incorporate IACP deployment cards into your campaigns, I think. But just going to be looking at the stuff that was printed in the boxes, came with the FFG. We're going to do the core set and all of the expansions for this. And we're going to start off with the core set. So you can see I've made my tier list here and sorted it by expansion. So we've got the core set at the top, and we've got all the expansions going all the way to Tyrants of Lothal at the bottom. And I thought we'd start us off. I actually did go ahead. I felt like it would be a little too daunting to try and tier all these figures on the fly. It's been a while since I played a campaign, but I just want to let everybody know I have played a lot of campaign. I've been playing this game since 2015. I've played each campaign multiple times. I've played all the app campaigns. I've done both solo, and I've done each campaign at least twice with a full group of human beings, not just against the computer. So I like to think I've got some experience with campaign. It's definitely been a while since my last campaign. I mostly play Skirmish now, but or designed for Skirmish actually. But yeah, I think it would be good to start off with establishing a baseline here. And so the first figure I'm going to talk about to do that is going to be actually the Stormtrooper, and just kind of the generic figure. You see it in the first mission of the campaign. You see it in filler in all the expansions, or as a filler figure in all the expansions. But I'm going to talk about each figure, both the regular and the elite, because they're definitely going to be different tiers based on their different classification. So let's start off with the regulars. Regular Stormtroopers, these are your bread and butter. 2 points each, 3 figures in a 6-point group. The fact that you get 3 figures in a single group and 3 figures in a single activation is really nice, actually, in my opinion. It's a really nice tempo boost that the Empire often needs in order to keep up with the Rebels. Because when you're the Empire player, you're often going to be losing 1 to 2 figures each activation, and you can quickly run out of activations, actually, because if you're only activating 1 figure between the Rebels are getting 2-3 attacks each activation, whereas each of your figures can only attack once each. So the fact that you have 3 figures activating at once means you're getting up to 3 attacks in an activation, which can help you match the Rebels in attack efficiency. So I've just found that they're quite good. They do drop off later in the campaign, usually I think around threat level, well, if you start at 2, like threat level 4, you start to drop off. They're really nice at threat level 3, in my opinion, because you can, you can save up to them over 2 rounds, and then you can just redeploy a fresh unit. And they do decent damage until the Rebels start getting some of those higher level armors where they can add passive blocks and stuff. Then the troopers do have a hard time. The regulars do have that reroll though, so it does help a lot with their consistency. So I actually would give, and I've given the regular Stormtroopers here. Let's move over here to this screen. I put them at B. So I think they're just a nice, solid B level figure. They're not amazing, but they're not bad either, and they're quite good when you you get them. You know what? I totally forgot to explain my tiers. So let's do that here. So by the way, I'm not ranking any of the villains. I'm just going to be ranking the generic deployment cards. The villains are kind of weird because you have to get them, you have to buy them. That'll probably be a different video where I rank the villains, the unique deployment cards for the Empire player. And these are also based on like figures that you've actually have to pay threat for and have a spot in your open groups. I'm not ranking these based on like when you get them for free as reserve groups. Anything that's free is going to be good usually most of the time. These are for like when you're looking at what open groups you want to bring to the next mission and you're deciding like what you need. This is going to help you, I think, help players do that. And of course, these are based on my opinions, but let's talk about the rankings here. So B is kind of in the middle, as I just said. We've got the regular Stormtrooper there. Above B is going to be A. These are going to be really efficient units. They hardly ever let you down. They're going to be very dependable, reliable figures. So those are kind of like almost top tier. S is going to be the broken stuff. This is going to be stuff that like no other deployment can really match in terms of what the figure does that you get from the deployment card. It tends to be either very efficient or very unique, has abilities that no other card has, and it's usually very points efficient, so you're often getting a lot more for your threat when you deploy them than you would deploying like another similarly costed figure, much more so. Going down below B, we have C. The C figures, they're okay. Like, you're not totally outclassed, maybe, but most of the time they're not going to quite be good enough to really slow the rebels down enough that, they don't just win the mission. You can make them work, especially with certain synergies. Figures that are not great but get better with synergies with specific cards, I'll put at C. And then we have D. These are the absolute worst, awful. Just don't spend your threat on these figures if you can help it. They're not going to help you win. They're going to really eat into your threat. Threat is a very limited resource that the Empire player has to use, and using your threat on these figures is just not a good idea, in my opinion, at the D level. So there we go. We've got the regular Stormtrooper at C. And moving on to let's talk about the Elite one. And I'll try to get through these. There's so many of them. Elite Stormtrooper. Hard to deploy early on, but once you get to that point, even actually at threat level 3, if you're playing a side mission, you'll get 6 threat from the bonus threat at the start of the mission, and then by the round 2 you'll have enough to deploy one of these. I find they are very solid. 5 health per figure. I've noticed even at the higher levels, it's very difficult for a rebel hero to kill more than one elite stormtrooper during their activation. Usually they can kill 1, but it's pretty tough to kill 2. That's 10 health that they have to get through with 2 attacks usually, and they have to get it in exact increments of 5. It's like if they did 6 to one and then 4 to the other, you're not going to get a kill from that, which is one of their strengths, is that their health is split up into increments. And then once they do that, one of the stormtroopers will get focused, which is really nice. So that means you're going to get at least 2 attacks usually when you deploy these guys, guaranteed. And that's just baseline. There's so many good class cards that buff troopers or give extra health to figures that they really start to get tanky once you start buffing their health. And their damage output does go up decently. It's not a huge increase from the regulars, but it's still very consistent, and they have that nice surge for +2 in addition to keeping that reroll. So I really like the Elite Stormtroopers. They're definitely not meant for early on in the campaign, but once you get to the point where you can, deploy them pretty consistently, usually threat level 3 or 4, they can be worth the threat, and really worth the threat investment. So I actually have these guys at an A. So we'll put those up there. All right, so moving on, we're going to continue to establish our baseline here with the core set figures. Let's go ahead and look at the Imperial officers. Those are the figures that you see second most common, and I think in the core campaign anyway. Looking at the base officer, 2-point filler. The problem with the officer, not very good at attacking, and you only get one figure in a group, so it's like, yeah, they might ignore the officers at least so that you can attack with them, but they're super easy to kill. Cower's nice if you can get it. Unfortunately, a lot of times they'll get deployed in initially where they're not adjacent to anybody, which kind of sucks. And the movement is just not quite as important in campaign as it is in skirmish. Even though they get the full move action, in campaign, your figures are just deployed initially right in front of the rebels, and it's just this like shootout that happens in the early rounds. It can be useful later in the mid game for sure, like to if you're deploying your figures further away. The only problem is that usually the rebels are going to have the activation advantage over you anyway, so it's not like you're going to get to have last activation with an officer and then another figure. So, but they're cheap. They're 2 points. They're really easy to deploy, especially in the early campaign. So I put the regular at C. Now, talking about the elite, it's excuse me. I mean, it's kind of nice having the elite being able to give an extra attack. If you have a mission where you've got like a big centerpiece figure, like a tank or something that you're getting for free from the mission, it might make sense to get these. They're just 5 health on a white die on 5 for 5 threat is just so easy to kill. They do stun, which is nice, which the regular officer doesn't have, but you're paying a lot of threat, and the problem I have with this is just there's such much better options at 5 threat compared to this guy. Again, it might be okay if you're playing in a mission that has a big centerpiece figure, but even then, like, it just makes more sense to me to get something that has better stats. I put the elite at a D actually. So that's my take on the officers. As you can see, we're building up our baseline here. Moving on, so we can fill out the rest of our slots, I'm going to go into mercenaries actually, and we're going to look at the Nexu. So the Nexu is really special because the Nexu is the cheapest large space figure that's 2x2, so it takes up 4 spaces you can get, even in the expansions. Really, I don't think there's any other 2x2 figures, at least that are not unique. And for 4 points, you get a decent health of 6 on top of a defensive ability with cunning. So it's often getting extra blocks from cunning. And the reason I really like the Nexu is for 4 points, you're blocking 4 spaces, which is usually enough to block a doorway or even sometimes an objective that the rebels have to get to if it's in a corner. You can put the Nexu on top of it, and they have to kill the Nexu before they can interact with it. So this makes the Nexu really powerful. Normally, to take up 4 spaces, you'd have to pay at least 8 points, like 6 for 3 regular stormtroopers and then 2 for an officer. You get to do that for half the cost with a Nexu. And the reason that's important, if you only deploy like 3 figures, the rebels just have to kill 1, and then they have access to the door or whatever you're trying to block. And also, you can't block objectives with just 3 figures. The rebels can move through you and get on top of the objective. So for that reason, the Nexu is just so good at slowing the rebels down. If there's like a choke point they have to get through, or a doorway or whatever, you just park the Nexu on top of it, and it like will slow them down usually by an activation or 2, which can often be enough to prevent them from hitting their time limit. especially if you do it multiple times, if there's multiple choke points. So for that reason, I actually give the Nexu an S. I have just found the Nexu to be an amazing piece to bring, and can often actually feel unfair to the rebels for just 4 points. Like, it can actually feel unfair, and that's what I classify as an S figure. For the elite, you're still getting that utility. You get 2 more points of health, but for 2 more threat, you're losing a lot of that efficiency I mentioned, where, for the Nexu covers 4 spaces for 4 points. The elite covers 4 spaces for 6 points. Slightly stronger attack, but it's okay. It's just not as efficient as the regular Nexus. So for that reason, I actually have it as an A still. Still very good. It's just not quite as broken as the regular, just because it's not as cheap. All right, moving on. We'll stick with mercenary here for a little bit. So Transoceans, I actually like the Transoceans a lot, especially the regulars. Very very decent point cost. Kind of odd always having that 7, since you're usually getting increments, doubles. Like, you're never gonna get to threat level 7. So to get to 7, you have to double. Usually you go from 3 to 6 or 4 to 8. So kind of odd dealing with that odd points cost, but that often leaves you, like, you can play around with that with like abilities that cost threat sometimes, which is nice. But they do a lot of damage if you can get both Relentless and Scattergun, which is usually not difficult. They have a good health to points ratio. I mean, 3 to point. The 3 reinforcement cost is really nice. They're not 4. And they have a decent health stat where, again, like I mentioned with the elite stormtroopers, very difficult for the rebels to kill 2 Trandoshan hunters in one activation, which means you're usually going to get at least 1 attack out of these guys, even with dealing with the rebels initiative, always having initiative. So I really like them. The strain's really good. Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but in campaign, if you can put strain on rebels, it really hampers their ability to use their abilities. Some of them, not all rebels, but a lot of rebels, like if you start piling on extra strain on them that they're not able to then spend to use their abilities, it can actually really hurt them if they have to rest more than they normally would. So I actually have, let's see, I have the regular Trandoshans at an A. I think I actually have both at an A. No, I have... So I have regular Trandoshans at an A. The elite Trandoshans, you get an extra +1 damage. You only get an extra 2 health on each figure for going up from... for having to pay an extra 3 threat, which is rough. 10 is just really high. In the later, like, threat level 5 is kind of the last few missions of the campaign, and then you have to wait 2 turns just to get these guys. And you're not getting a whole lot. Like, the rebels can usually one-shot or take out 1 Trandoshan hunter at 8 health in an activation. At that point, they're leveled up enough they can do that. So, you're not really benefiting that much. You're usually going to have 1 Trandoshan left by the time the first rebel hero activates. So might as well just make it a regular. They still have Surge for Pierce 2 and Bleed. They do get an extra Surge for Focus, but again, your figures are just not surviving that long, that late in the campaign when you're playing against these super powerful rebels. So being able to focus is often not going to lead to any kind of extra damage. Also, they don't have great surges for adding damage with focus. That's the other problem. The main thing, and they're still just dealing 1 strain with Relentless, but they do get +2 with Scattergun. They're okay. Like I said, they're okay. It's just the regulars are so much better, and there's other figures at 10 that I would rather be spending my threat on over these guys. And so, for that reason, I have them at a C. And actually, I should be ranking these guys next to... Yeah, I have Nexu as being better than Trandoshans. Elite Trandoshans are better or worse? I think they're worse than a regular officer. Just, well, let me think about that. Like, so the way I was doing this when I was making this list is I thought, okay, how do I compare, figures with different costs? If I could take an officer and any other 8-point figure or a 10-point Trandoshan, which would I take? I mean, I could take I think I would take the Trandoshans over that. So I do think the Trandoshans are better than the regular officer, the elite Trandoshans. Alright, moving on. Let's jump back over to Empire. So that's all we have left. Let's talk about probe droids. So probe droid, actually quite good. I like the regulars. The only problem is that speed 3 is really annoying sometimes, but it is offset by mobile. Their surges are not that good, and they don't have a reroll, which means their accuracy often suffers, and sometimes they miss, especially since they can only move 3 spaces. They're also not too hard to one-shot in one activation, and then you lose an activation, which is not fun. But they're good filler units, so I do like them. I think I have them at... I'm going to guess what I have them at. I would put them at a B before looking. I have them at a C, which makes sense. They're definitely not as good as... Like, I would take a group of stormtroopers over 2 probe droids. I think. But I think so they're not B level. I think they're definitely C. I think they're better? I think they are better. Definitely better than an officer. Let's see. I might actually just go with it instead of looking at my list here. Probe droid. Yeah, I would say better than officer. I'd rather have a probe droid than 2 officers for sure. And I think I would rather have... Would I rather have 3 probe droids or 1 group of Trandoshan hunters? I think I'd actually have 3 probe droids. So let's go with that. The elite is actually quite a bit better, mostly because that speed 4 is really nice. You can do some fun peekaboos through like blocking terrain. You move to shoot, move to back. The recover 2 is also a lot more impactful, especially with that 7 health, which is really nice. They can actually stick around a lot longer than you might imagine. Sometimes rebels just aren't able to... They definitely can't one-shot these with 1 attack, and sometimes they can't actually get the kill with 2. I forgot to mention self-destruct. I almost never use self-destruct. I just find I'd rather be attacking with them and making the rebels waste attacks on me. Like, it feels like you're giving up free active action advantage, so I just don't use that as much, but it is fun if you can pull it off. It's just difficult because it's so telegraphed, and the rebels always have last activation over you. So if you park your probe droid next to them, they're going to be like, oh, we see what you're doing there, kill that probe droid. It is harder to do that with the elite, but you're also giving up a lot more threat when you do that. The reroll's really good on these. I really like that for helping with the accuracy issue, since they can't search for accuracy, and they have great surges, so they often do a lot of damage and have very consistent damage output. I definitely put these, I think, in B. If not A, I might actually have these at A. It looks like I have these at B. Would I rather take 2 probe droid elites or 2 stormtrooper groups? I mean, for 12 and an officer, I think, I still think they're not quite as efficient as regular stormtroopers, so I'm going to put them... Yeah, I think that's what I need to start doing, is using my baselines here. So, not quite as good as regular stormtroopers, but definitely a league above the C guys. Alright, moving on, we've got Royal Guards. Now we're going to talk about nerfed Royal Guards. I might mention what I think of them in their previous unnerfed state, which is what I was used to seeing them as, but They did get nerfed in campaign as well as in skirmish, which I think was for the best. They were too strong in both for sure, at least at the time, and definitely in campaign still. Um, regular. So regular Royal Guard, quite good. Really excellent health, excellent speed. They have reach. One of their biggest assets is actually their surge for stun. It's just so annoying to deal with that as a rebel. And when you can have two of them stunning two heroes in a round cycle, it's pretty backbreaking. If the rebels are having half of their heroes getting stunned each round, it is absolutely horrendous for them. So, and then because they have such high health, if you get these guys out in the early game, like early campaign missions, they are a terror for sure. Their damage output is definitely decreased for sure without the surge for +2. But as long as you get a decent roll or the hero gets a bad defense roll and you can get that stun through, that's almost way more important than them dealing damage. Just deal 1 damage and stun if you can. And again, they're super fast, so it's difficult for the rebels to stay out of their threat range. I think they're probably B level. I would definitely put them at a B. And I would say I would say they're better than regular stormtroopers. Just because that stun is so valuable compared to any amount of damage you might be dealing with the regular stormtroopers. I don't think they're quite at the A range anymore. Just because that stun it's good, but it's not reliable. Especially since they don't have that surge for +2. So like, even if you get 2 surges, it's not always guaranteed to break through like a triple block or like an armor boost from the rebels. So I don't think they're quite at A level, but I would say high B tier for sure. The elites, these guys are monsters at any point in the campaign. That +1 evade is crazy. They keep their surge for +2 and their surge for stun, so they're hitting like the old Royal Guards did. They still lost Sentinel, and they get a focus if the rebels, because they're so hard to kill. The rebels kind of just have to shoot at other stuff, but if they do, then they're getting focused on the elites, which makes them really deadly. 10 health, not great health for points, but that +1 evade actually does a lot of work for stopping surge for +2s. It stops a lot of the rebels' abilities that are based on surges, so that makes them really strong. The problem is their cost. They're just too expensive. 12 points is like, the maximum threat level you hit in the game is 6, so even you'd only see them in like the finales, really. And at that point, you're holding off for 2 turns to deploy these guys, of spending any threat on anything else. So they really have to pull their weight, and as just 2 figures, like, they don't quite get there. I mean, if you're stunning the rebels, 2 rebels, again, that works, but usually at that point the rebels are strong enough that they can take these guys out in a round cycle. Like, 3 rebels attacking these guys will probably take out at least 1 and possibly both, which makes it really hard to justify only being able to deploy them every other turn and not deploying anything else, at least from your open groups. So I put these guys at C, but I think definitely high C. I don't think they're better than Transoceans, just because, again, they're just more expensive, and they're dealing around the same damage. They are a lot harder to kill than Transoceans that have 8 health and no defensive buffs. But you can get Transoceans a lot earlier in the campaign. Even 5 threat, or even sometimes 4 threat in a side mission, and if you have some way to generate extra threat, you could get the regulars out. But I'm going to actually put them below the elite Transoceans, and I think, are they better than an officer? I might be really undervaluing the officer. I just never found them to be useful in campaign. I've always found that when I spend threat on them, they just don't do enough for me. I think they're better than regular officers. These are these are mini bosses for sure. Like, they are hard to kill, and the rebels will probably only be able to kill one of them. And in that case, you could reinforce in the same round. So maybe they're a little easier to get than I'm giving them credit for. I'm actually going to put these above. I'm going to have to update my list as I go. Yeah, I'm going to put these above the Elite Transoceans. That stun is just really good. And they're not quite as good as regular probes, because regular probes are really good filler. So, all right, moving on. What are we at here? Man, this is going to take a while. Let's move on to the Eweb. Eweb Engineer. So the Eweb, we've got the Elite and the regular. We'll talk about the regular first. So the regular, the regular is so iconic, of course, because you get it well, oh shoot, this might be a spoiler, but you get the Eweb at a very critical point very early in the core campaign, and I think it leaves an impression on a lot of people because the way it deploys, like, it basically gets to activate immediately. It's focused. Oftentimes it'll be focused for the second shot from the 0 point card for military might. That's the name of the class deck in the core set. So it's often hitting the rebels twice focused before they can even react to it. It's pretty traumatizing, honestly. But the problem is that is a very contrived scenario for the Eweb. When you actually deploy it in a game, like, the rebels aren't going to just let you get 2 shots off with it. Either they're going to stay out of line of sight if they can't get to it, or they're just going to kill it. And it's not difficult to kill. It's got the same amount of health as an elite stormtrooper, which we mentioned rebels should be able to easily kill one of those in one activation. Even early in the campaign, it's not difficult to kill a 5 health figure with just a black die and no other defense. Now, it's true if they can't kill it, that recover 2 is quite nice. However, it's not guaranteed, and often you'll have to sacrifice some damage to trigger it. But it does help with their durability some. That's only really going to happen in, like, the first 3 missions of the campaign. Once you get into, like, mission 4 and beyond, the rebels are going to just one-shot this thing, no problem, or at least one activation kill it. So I'm not a huge fan of the Eweb. I think I have it as a C. Yeah, I think it's a C. I think I would put it... Is it still better than a regular officer, though? No, I'm going to say it's worse than a regular officer because they both are easily killed in one activation. The officer only costs 2, and the Eweb costs a massive 6 points, which is just so much. Now, the Elite I like a lot better. The Elite has more health, and it has that +1 block, and it keeps the recover 2. So it's got more health. It's a lot harder to kill in just one activation. It's still possible, but that +1 block helps a lot. And then it'll often recover off most of the damage it takes. So I like that. Also, speed 3 is a lot better. As weird as that sounds, you can redeploy it, and you can also get if you have an officer, usually from your initial groups, you can actually rapid redeploy this thing using the officer's movement ability, and getting 3 speed, 3 movement instead of 2 can be a lot for that. So I think I might actually put this at a B. Let's see. Well, let me look at what I have so far. Is it better than regular stormtroopers? The tripod really hurts it. So, it's just because it's easy to avoid for the rebels. They can just take pot shots at it until it's gone, and it can't shoot back. I think it's better than regular probe droids, just for the damage output and it does have a major effect on the battlefield and on the rebels, because they do have to change their tactics and maybe stay in places they wouldn't want to. But it's a lot less flexible, I think, than the elite probe droids and figures that can move and shoot. So I would put it below the elite probe droid. Alright, and then finally our last core set figure is going to be the ATST. And again, just ignore General Weiss there. We're not talking about villains for this. We're just going to be talking about the unique deployment cards. So, I mean, it's a D. It's bad. The ATST is bad. You should not, if you want to win missions, you should not be putting this in your open groups. If you want to meme on the rebels and like taunt, mock them, basically, then yeah, put it in your open groups, stomp around with it, and watch as they just run around your ATST, take like 4 or 5 damage from it each round, and just win the round because you haven't deployed anything else besides this. I actually did deploy 2 of these. I managed to deploy 2 ATSTs in one side mission. It was like threat level 5, so I got 10 threat to start the mission off. And then there was like a mission event that gave you threat equal to threat level. So somehow I was able to deploy 2. I think one of them might have been an initial group or something, but it was funny. It was the Boba Fett side mission, I should mention that. So I had Boba Fett and 2 ATSTs. Pretty sure I lost that one, but I was just memeing on the rebels because they were having a hard time against me at that up to that point. Yeah, it's just bad. It's too expensive for the damage output it deals. And there's cheaper ways to get a massive figure that can block. Like that's the main selling point of these massive 6 space figures, is they block movement really well, just like the Nexu. But the Nexu is 4 points, and then you're paying 10 more points for 2 extra spaces. There's other massive figures that are way cheaper than this that also do a lot more damage. So ATSC is really bad. Don't play it in your open groups unless you are memeing. Alright, we finally got through the core set. Feeling good about this tier list here so far. Let's move on to Twin Shadows. Looking at the heavy stormtroopers. I like the regulars quite a lot, actually. They are difficult, especially in the early campaign. It's very difficult for the rebels to kill one of these because, 6 health. It's about 50-50, I found, for them to kill one. But then you're getting like blue-red. And then if you can get composite plating to trigger, although that's difficult often in the early rounds when they start off really close to your figures. I would say probably like a C for heavy stormtrooper, though. I don't think it's as good as regular stormtroopers. Regular stormtroopers, you're just much more likely to have 2 attacks in an activation once the rebels have their activation. And the heavy stormtrooper, I think you're more likely to only be having 1 attack from them after the rebels activate. I think I'd rather have 2 probe droids than a heavy stormtrooper, but I'd definitely take 2 groups of regular heavies over a single group of royal guards. So I will put it behind behind this guy. And then the elites I actually like quite a lot more. 8 health is very difficult to kill in one activation, even for higher level rebels, so you're often going to get both your attacks off. And the surge is much better, and you also have the blast 2, which is not usually relevant unless you can catch the rebels early. So actually it can be quite good at the start of the mission when they've just deployed. You can sometimes get surge for blast 2 twice, especially if you're playing the deck that gives you extra surges. I forget what it's called. Oh, Technological Superiority. That deck is quite good with the heavy stormtroopers. I would actually put them at B. I think I like them actually more than the Royal Guards. I'm not sure. Royal Guards can stun. They do have the same durability, though, and they have about the same range. Yeah, I think I might actually like them more than Royal Guards. They're very close. I'm looking at my original one. I actually had them behind Royal Guards. I'm actually going to put I think they're better, actually. I'm going to put them above Royal Guards. I don't think I was thinking about technological superiority. So that's the heavy elite heavies. Moving on to the other group from Twin Shadows was the where are they? Oh, here we go. Tuscans. Yeah, so Tuscans. I don't like the regular that much. It is 2 reinforcement, which is good, but it's got 5. Like that 5 deployment cost just is so awkward. It would be so much better if it was 4. They do have 4 health for a 2-point figure, but again, it's more like a 2.5-point figure. Red green attack is good, but their surges are terrible. And then Tuscan Cycler is okay. Gives them some flexibility, but it just without any surge abilities, like that's the problem. Is like attacks need surge abilities to be functional. If you're just attacking and you don't have any surge abilities to add damage, you're often at the whims of very bad dice rolls. It's very easy to get bad rolls that way. So I really don't like Tuscans. When I've played them, I found them to be very, very underwhelming. I actually would put them at D. I would definitely take 3 groups of regular Tuscans over an ATST, but I would actually take I think I would take an officer over a group of Tuscans, of regular Tuscans. Yeah. Yep. So I'm happy with that. Now the elites are a much different story. That +1 damage is really nice. Especially without, you don't have to spend a surge on it, and surge for weekend is pretty good too. You still have the crappy Tuscan Cycler ability, but their health is much better. 7 health is pretty good for a 7-point figure. I think these guys are pretty comparable to Transoceans, actually, at least in damage output. Now, I would say that Surge for Weekend is not quite as good as Surge for Bleed and Auto Strain. So they're not really quite as good as regular Transoceans. So I wouldn't put them at A. I think I would put them in C. Would I take them over Elite Royal Guards? Probably not, if I had enough threat and, adding 5 threat to them. They're definitely better than the regular Eweb, so let's put them there. Are they better than an officer? Would I take 3 officers over a single group of Tuscans? No, actually, I would take Tuscans over 3 officers. But I don't think they're quite as good as the Elite Transoceans, even, for the extra point cost. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I would put them in C underneath the Elite Transoceans. Alright, moving on to one of the expansions. We have hired guns. So hired guns are the regular is 4 points, 2 reinforcement costs, and they have parting shot, which lets them basically perform a free attack once they suffer damage equal to their health. These guys are busted. They are absolutely busto. Especially now, if you're just playing them vanilla, like without any enhancements, they're good. They're good. They're solid. They're like A tier. You have to know how to play them though, which means you have to just basically activate them first. Move 5 spaces. It's insane that they have 5 speed. You move 5 spaces. You attach them to basically a hero that has already activated. You take your regular shot, and then basically your opponent, the rebels, can't kill them without taking additional attacks. Now, where they get really broken is when you add them to force multiplier abilities, such as the 4 XP ability in Hoth that gives every attack Pierce 1. Any attachment that gives them like extra surge for +1 or extra damage. So yeah, where they start to get really busted is when you add on any kind of like force multipliers to attacks. So like the 4 XP card and precision training that gives all of your attacks Pierce 1 is insane with these guys. Imperial Industry is notoriously broken, but especially with these guys, since they're often able to get up to 8 attacks around. And then you just redeploy them. They're so cheap. But really, any attachment that like gives them extra damage without like needing to exhaust, it's so strong on these guys, because if your opponent kills them, they're just taking extra damage from your enhancements. If your opponent doesn't kill them, then you are free to use that threat elsewhere to deploy other threats that the rebels have to deal with. So these guys are a nuisance. I raffle stomped a campaign with them before I realized how broken they were. And they are insane. These guys are definitely S tier. The elites are good. They're just less efficient. It's very similar to the Nexu. You really just want to maximize your attacks per points is what I found. And so the hired guns don't really give you any extra attacks compared to the elite hired guns don't give you any extra attacks compared to the regulars. So you're not getting quite as much value. They get an extra +1 evade, which is like okay, but you want them to die and trigger parting shot instead, and then just redeploy them. So it's not much of an upgrade. And then the Surge for Pierce 1, also not much of an upgrade over Surge for +1. Or excuse me, the reverse. For Surge for +1 is not much of an upgrade from Surge for Pierce 1. Still very good though. Like honestly, I would take them as a handicap if I didn't want to take the busted hired guns. Their efficiency does drop quite a bit, costing 6 though. I think I would put them at low A tier actually. Yeah, I'd put them under the regular Transoceans. Alright, moving on. Oh, we get to talk about the Bantha. Bantha Rider. There you are. Bantha Rider is an interesting one. Definitely fun that you get to just deploy it. 9 points. Again, so going back to the ATST, again, 9 points for a massive figure. Really nice. That extra health is nice, especially if you're playing against a hero team that has a lot of Pierce. This can be really useful, that you basically negate their Pierce by having health instead of defense dice. You have unpierceable health basically, or it's like having unpierceable blocks. The problem with the Bantha is that the Trample and Stampede are just not quite as useful. You really don't want to be spreading damage in campaign against the rebel heroes. It just is not as effective, I have found. You really want to wound the rebels as fast as you can, because wounding is so crippling, whereas just like random piles of damage tokens doesn't actually hurt the rebels as much as actually wounding them. Also, Habitat Desert sucks. I forgot about that. That's a thing. It's not super restrictive. That's going to be about half of the maps in the core set, and then maybe like a third of maps if you're using the other expansion missions. Mostly utility is coming from the fact that this thing takes up 6 spaces, which makes it really good at blocking hallways. So I would actually put this at C. I think there's better figures that do this than the Bantha for the same points cost, but it's still decent. I guess the Habitat kind of knocks it down a bit. I think I would put this. I would actually take 4 officers over the Bantha, so I'm going to put this below the regular officer at C. Okay, moving on to the Return to Hoth expansion. So we've got HK Assassin Droids. HKs are interesting. I found them to be pretty effective when deployed in the late game, like the later part of a mission. Just like when the rebels have moved past one of your deployment points, you can deploy them to one of the earlier deployment points on the map, so they're far away and they can do some good sniping. Now, that being said, without access to focus like they have in Skirmish, their attacks are okay. I mean, versatile weaponry is actually quite good, especially if they have a lot of white dice. And then you have the Search for Weaken, which can be quite useful. But they're very squishy for their cost. Like, they're basically like elite stormtroopers minus one figure, which is really bad when you think about it. Like, yeah, you're getting that extra die, but it kind of balances out with the fact that their surge is not as good as the elite stormtroopers. Yeah, I think I have these guys at B. I would put them. Would I take the regulars over a heavy stormtrooper group? Honestly, I would take the heavy stormtrooper group in more scenarios than I would take the HKs. I think they can be as similar though. I would actually take HKs over rail guards. I think. Well, rail guards can stun. Are they better than regular stormtroopers? No. Are they better than... No. Okay, I would definitely take them over Elite Eweb. So I'm going to put them right underneath the Elite Probe Droid. Now, as for the elites are very inefficient, paying extra 3 points for a very similar card. You're only getting 1 extra health on each one. You get an extra surge for +1. And then priority target is just like not as important in campaign, especially against the rebels. It's good for the rebels against the Empire, but not for the Empire against the rebels. Although that being said, if you're using the tactic where you're deploying them far away, it can be helpful for being able to attack the hero that is either needs to be wounded or is closest to being wounded. But 11 is just a lot of points. I would put these guys at D, actually. I mean, I would take them over an ATST. Would I take them over 2 Tuscans? No, I would take 2 groups of regular Tuscans over these guys for sure. Alright, moving on. We've got the tank from Return to Hoth. So this guy I like a lot more than both the Bantha and the ATST. Defensible makes it pretty tanky, no pun intended. About comparable to the ATSD, but for 4 points less. You know, if you would guess that this would take like 4 attacks to take down, right? That means you're adding 4 blocks with defensible, so it has kind of like 14 health on it. But the reason I really like this one is because it can actually perform 2 attacks, which is really good. It can kind of be like a big Eweb. It doesn't have the recover, but it's much more tanky again. But you'll probably see this more as a reserve figure in that campaign. I think it can work, and it can be a lot of fun to deploy these big, massive figures. So I'm gonna put him. I think I would put the tank at. I don't think it's a B. I think at the end of the day, the Elite Eweb is slightly better. Well, it can move and shoot though. Yeah, I would actually say it's better than the Elite Eweb, but not. I don't think it's quite as good as having the HKs. I think the HKs are a little more flexible in where you can deploy them. All right, moving on to the Snowtroopers. So, Snowtroopers are interesting. They're 1 point more than Stormtroopers. They have 1 more health each. And they have the ability Environmental Recovery Gear to recover 1 damage or discard a harmful condition from each adjacent friendly trooper. So that's fun. If your rebel heroes are spreading damage, you can kind of make use of that. The problem is, though, it's an action, so you have to position them so they can attack and use recovery gear. The other problem is they only have Surge for Pierce, and they roll blue and a green, which means if you roll badly, you can roll 0 damage with these guys, and they have no reroll capability. which makes them very unreliable attackers. I do not like snowtroopers. I think they are far worse than regular stormtroopers in terms of being a reliable source of damage. You do have to play with them in the campaign, in the Return to Hoth expansion, but I would just never bring them outside of it, I don't think. Even though I think I have before as open groups. I don't know why. Again, I think I was probably trolling my group a little bit. Yeah, I would put the regulars. I honestly want to put them at D. Is there any redeemable qualities? Would I bring them over an Eweb? Or a regular Eweb? I mean, they still have a lot of the benefits of regular stormtroopers, in that there's 3 of them, but they don't have the reroll. I think I would bring them over. I think I would still bring them instead of a regular Eweb, but I would probably try and find a way to get a Bantha over these guys. Now, as for the elites, again, 1 point more than the elite stormtroopers, and they have efficient travel, which is good in Hoth, but not that great in any other campaign. They're just worse elite stormtroopers. Again, they don't have anything that makes the elite stormtroopers good. They don't have the reroll. They don't have the focus. Surge for Pierce 2 again leaves it so you can roll 0 damage. And Surge for Focus is just not good in campaign, where your figures are just dying left and right to the rebel heroes. I think these guys are actually a D. I'm gonna put them. Are they better or worse than elite HKs? I think they're worse. Yeah, I think they're definitely worse than elite HKs. All right, and now onto the Wampa. So the Wampa, I believe, suffers from habitat snow, which is too bad, but it is a neat little figure, a neat large figure. The problem with the Wampa is it's very slow with 3 speed. The 2 red plus 1 on the regular, is fine. The surge for stun would be good, except it's rolling 2 reds. And then it has hunger, and the problem with hunger is that as a large figure, you could have a figure that's within 3 spaces of you to deny you hunger, but not be able to get to it because these guys don't have reach, which they do in ICP, which is just like funny to me to look at them now without reach. So, you might not trigger hunger and then still not be able to reach a target with them. They were fun as initial groups in the campaign, but they're so clunky. And then obviously Habitat Snow, you're not really going to be playing these guys outside of the campaign that they came from. The elite, looking at the elite, I think the elite is a bit better. That plus 2 innate is nice. They don't have a great health to cost ratio, like if you compare them to elite or regular Royal Guards. They have 16 health for 8 points. This guy's only got 12. And it's still speed 3. You do get surge for bleed and stun if you can add a surge somehow with your abilities, but it's still so clunky, and you don't have any of the tools that you'd have for them in Skirmish that makes them good, like Beast Tamer and Pummel. I mean, you might have that in your class cards, but usually there's not a whole lot. The one place where I think these guys are good is the Dark Side class deck from, I want to say Heart of the Empire had it, where it gives bonuses to groups that only have 1 figure in them. I think if you're running that class deck and you're in a snow mission, maybe a side mission for Leia or something, these guys would be fun to play around with. Otherwise, I don't see them being that good. At 5 points, at least the regular is like not too difficult to bring. I think I would bring 2 of these over 2 elite HKs, but I would not bring them over regular Tuscans. And then I think I would bring the elite over a lot of these, actually. I might put the elite at the top of D. I think the elite's close. It can do a lot of damage with that one attack. 2 reds plus 2. Like, against a white die figure, if they roll bad, you do a lot of damage with one attack, and I can attest to that from my experience with them. But they're still clunky for what they do and how much they cost. Alright, getting into Bespin. Moving right along here. We've got the ISB infiltrators. So these guys are a lot of fun if you can set them up correctly, where they are getting 3 attacks per activation. The problem is that once you lose a figure from the group, you go from 3 attacks potential to just 1. And the regulars are really easy to kill. The elites are also actually pretty easy to kill. I mentioned that 6 health, and they only have a white die instead of a black die. I would say there's about a 50% chance of losing one of these to a single hero activation, which then cuts you off from coordinated raid, unfortunately. Now, deadly is quite nice to have against rebel heroes. The white die are very annoying. And if you can hide them, so you always have that +1 surge, they get a lot better. I think they definitely get a lot better with the class deck that comes with Bespin, the one that gives you a lot of hidden tokens. So they can benefit from their surge abilities, which are pretty good on the elite, at least. I would put the elite actually like maybe high B or low A. It's just really hard to make that coordinated raid work. I mean, if you can, they're quite devastating, but looking at my thing here, for 7, would I take them over heavy? I don't think so. I don't think I would take them over regular. I think they are a nice step up from the regular stormtroopers. I would actually put them below the regular stormtroopers. I think if you play them early in the campaign, they can be better. I think later on, you want to just start spamming 2-point figures and hope some of them survive. The regulars, though, I would put in C. I think they're better than the elite row guards, but I don't think I would take them over a regular heavy trooper. Alright, moving on here to the Ugnaughts. There they are. I don't know if you guys can see the junk droid. Let's see if this works. Hope that didn't work. Okay, well, we'll just talk about Ugnaughts. So the regular version, both of them have spot weld, which lets them put the junk droid companion into play. The junk droid is a companion with 1 health, speed 4, a green melee attack, no defense, and it has +1 damage. And then both of them let the junk droid use their surge abilities. But the elite has overclock, which gives a mover attack to the junk droid, which I think is actually a lot better. Because it's unlike in Skirmish, where you can like put 6 of these on a list and just chain them and get junk droid activation out of each one. Usually you're going to have like maybe 2 of these guys. That's 8 threat if you want 2, and one of them is the elite. And they're a lot easier to kill by the rebels. The rebels can just kind of kill whatever they want if it's going to be advantageous to them. For that reason, I don't like the regular that much, but I actually kind of like the elite a little more. Surge for Pierce 2 and Surge for Bleed is nice, although again, blue and a yellow, you can roll no damage on that attack sometimes. But being able to overclock the junk droid is nice, especially if the rebels leave the junk droid alone for whatever reason. You can redeploy the Ugnaught, and then if the junk droid's already out and in a good position, you can use overclock to attack with it. Also, the nice thing you can do with these guys is, if the rebels don't kill the junk droid and then you redeploy an Ugnaught, you can activate the junk droid first, then activate the Ugnaught. overclock with the junk droid, and then use spot weld to make another junk droid that comes into play readied, and then activate with that junk droid. So that line of play actually makes the elite Ugnaught a lot more interesting to me than the regular. So I would actually put the elite for 5 points. Honestly, I think I like it more than I like HKs, but I think I like the elite probe droid more, just for being, more consistent and less gimmicky. Regular Ugnaught, I don't really like. Is it better than an officer? Yes, I would say so, because it actually combos with other Ugnaughts. So, but I don't think it's as good as an elite Tuscan. And then the final figure group from Bestman is the Wing Guards. So Wing Guards are stormtroopers at home. You've got, actually, I think they might. This one's tough. I'm not sure if they're actually better. The problem is not having the reroll on the regulars. And keep the pieces a weird ability that the rebels can just not trigger. So I think the regular Wing Guards are bad versions of regular stormtroopers. They still have some of the good qualities though. Also, the Surge for Recover is completely useless or pointless on a 3 health figure. I don't think I would take them over Heavy, but I would take them over the ISB Infiltrators regular. The Elites are an interesting story. Keep the pieces still bad, but they gain squad training, and they also gain a Search for Recover 2. Which is, usually a lot more useful than Search for Accuracy. Although it does mean that they have to get a lot closer to attack than an elite stormtrooper could just hang back or make an attack against a rebel that's further away but a better target. And they don't have a final stand. So actually, yeah, I'm gonna have to say Wing Guards. Elite Wing Guards are also significantly worse than elite stormtroopers. They are better than their regular counterparts. At 9 points, I think the Recover is decent, but it's not gonna be like game breaking. I think they're better than the tank. Are they better than HKs? You're still getting 3 figures. They're troopers, so they do get trooper bonuses. So I guess it just depends on which deck you're taking. If you're taking technological superiority, you can take the droids. If you're taking military might, you might want to take the Wing Guards. I think the fact that there's just like a strictly better group actually pushes them down quite a bit. I think the HKs are pretty unique in what they do, so I'm actually going to put them above the tank in B. I think they're decent at B. Alright, moving on. We have the Dewback Rider. So this was actually released with the so Nord Captain Taro there, released with the Jabba's Realm expansion, but as its own figure pack. You didn't get it in the actual expansion. You had to buy the figure pack if you wanted to get this deployment card. And the Dewback's actually quite good. For 5, you get the 3 dice attack, really nice health value of 9, and then a way to deal extra damage to a different figure through Shock Lance as well as free movement. I've really liked the Dewback every time I played it. It doesn't have habitat, which is great. It means you can like deploy it on a Star Destroyer in the tight hallways, and it's been quite good for me. I would actually put it in the A tier, I think. Is it better? I think it is definitely better than Hired Guns. I think at 5 it's definitely better than Transoceans. Yeah, I actually think it's better than Elite Stormtroopers. I would take 2 of these over a group of Elite Stormtroopers for sure. I quite like the Dewback Rider. Alright, next up is going back to Scum. So Jabba's realm again. The Gamorreans. All right. So the Gamorrean, there's quite a gap between the regular and the elite Gamorreans, I must say. So at 6, we've got the regular, which for some reason has -1 damage, and then they also has to take a strain to reroll. And the Gamorrean honor just gives you like everything is so terrible on the regular. I don't know why, but they're bad, and I don't want to ever use them. And I would definitely not use them over Tuscans. I would definitely not take them over a Wampa, and I would not take them over HKs. Would I take 2 over Elite Snows? Honestly, no, I wouldn't take them. I would take 2 over 1 ATST, and that's about it. So these guys are hot garbage. Now the elites are a very different story. They get a free reroll with professional. They get a +1 block instead of a reroll while they're defending, and that's against ranged attacks, but that's okay. And then they have a Surge for Cleave 2 instead of the Surge for Cleave 1, and no -1 damage penalty. And they have a very good, they have a much better health to cost ratio than the regulars. You know, they're the same as Royal Guards. So yeah, I like these. I think these are quite good. They don't do anything super special. They don't stun or anything broken like that. But I actually think I would put them in the same category as Elite Heavies, and I actually would say I like them more than Elite Heavies. So, top of B tier. Moving on back to Empire from Jabba's realm, we've got the Jet Troopers. So, Jet Troopers are very interesting. They're a bit cookie cutter, but they have some cool abilities. I do like the regular. I think you run into the problem. So there's a trade-off here with the regular. You run into the problem where you are more likely to not be able to make 2 attacks in a single activation because these guys are not difficult to kill and you only have 2 of them. But they come in such a nice point cost. 4 is just so nice. I didn't mention this with the hired guns, but that 4-point cost, especially in the early game, you're just going to hit that 4 threat so often that it makes them really easy to deploy. So I actually think... Are they better than regular stormtroopers? It's close. It's close. I mean, and they also have a defensive bonus from Agile. Jets is okay on the regulars. You don't get a whole lot, but they're also mobile. I'm actually gonna give it to the regulars over the Jets over the stormtroopers. And I think I actually think I would put them higher than. Do I put them higher than Royal Guards? No, I'm not going to put them higher. I'm going to put them higher than ISBs, but not higher than Royal Guards. They're just more efficient than ISBs. But the Royal Guards have stun. The Jets don't really do that. They're just kind of little plinkers that plink away. Now the elite Jets, these guys are good. I mean, obviously they're good. We know they're good from Skirmish, but unlike Skirmish, where a lot of figures need like that extra support packages that you don't have available in campaign, these guys are just solid on their own. That's why they're good in Skirmish, is because they don't need any extra support, and the same is true here. You're getting a 3-dice attack almost all the time. You've got that defensive ability that can really screw up the hero's attack by taking away their surge, which might give them +2 damage. And they've got a good surge ability, and they can move a lot, and they're mobile, so they can be very annoying, popping out from behind blocking terrain. Definitely have these guys at A, and I would definitely say, at that health, 7 health, they are very difficult to one-shot, especially with flyby. So I can actually see one of these guys surviving a hero activation and being able to attack with both. Not to mention that it's so easy to just deploy them behind blocking terrain or whatever and just use that mobile to get really close and attack from safety. Are they better than Dewbacks? They're definitely better than the elite stormtroopers. This one's tough, but I think actually they are. I think they're just so efficient by comparison. The only weakness is their reinforcement cost being 4. It's actually a boon to them in skirmish because of Call the Vanguard, but in campaign it's rough. It means it's hard. It's very hard to reinforce them if one of them dies early. But yeah, agile and flyby are just amazing abilities on these guys, as well as mobile. I would say they're top of A. I don't think they're broken. I think they're rate monsters. RATE, by the way, rate monster just means like they have really good stats for their points, but they don't do anything that's like super special. Whereas the Nexu, you know, taking up 4 spaces for such a low point cost, and then the hired guns being able to get attacks off guaranteed, even if the heroes kill them before they activate, which I don't think I mentioned about the hired guns is one of the things that makes them so good. Is normally you have to deal with the rebel heroes activating first and killing your units before they get to attack, which is a very strong strategy. You can't do that to the hired guns. Really, the only way that you could do that is if the hired guns are like far away from all of their figures, all of the heroes and allies. But if they kill them, it's very likely that they're gonna get the hired guns get to attack back, which is what makes them so good. Alright, sorry. Sidetrack there. Moving on to the Rancor. This is our campaign version. I have a hard time ranking the Rancor. I would put it... I think it's worse than the tank since it can only attack once. It doesn't have brutality in campaign. Feed is a weird ability. I don't think it's worth using to give up your board presence against the heroes to recover some damage. Obviously very thematic though. It was definitely inspired the IACP version we put out in Season 7. Throws fine. It's nice to be able to do, again, if you have such an expensive figure, you want to be able to do damage to not just one figure with one attack. Search for +3 is really good, so damage output is good, as is search for cleave 2. It only has 1 defense site, so it has +1 block. Okay, where would I put the Rancor? I think Rancor is just one of those figures you don't bring as an open group, again, unless you're like trying to have fun with it. I think I would put it below the Bantha just because you're getting the same amount of like space filling area for more points with the Rancor. But it's definitely better than the regular Snowtrooper for sure. So I think I would put it in C tier. Kind of bottom of C tier. Moving on to the weakways. I actually like both weakways quite a lot. I find the regular groups to be not super impressive, but they just do fine. As if the rebels leave them alive, they're gonna do decent damage thanks to Raider. They don't have to deal with dodges. They don't have to deal with bad attack rolls unless you like get really screwed by randomness. So I actually think the regulars are just fine. I would actually put them. I would put them above Ugnaughts, but probably below the elite probe droid. And then the elite weakways are quite good. That prowl ability, really nice, especially if you can position them so they can prowl and then attack. They just have such good surge abilities, especially compared to the regular. And then you still have Raider. The low health is an issue. It means it's not difficult to lose one of these guys in a single rebel hero activation, as well as the high reinforcement cost, same as the jet troopers. But the fact that they kind of come preloaded with the focus that they usually enjoy in skirmish makes them quite a bit better than like most skirmish centric figures. Would I take these over? I think the comparison here would be to the regular Transoceans. I don't think they do enough actually to be better than the regular Transoceans, and I don't think they do enough to actually be better than the elite hired guns either. But I would take them over. Would I take them over Gamorrean? I want to put them at A, but I don't know. Maybe I need to bump up the elite Gamorreans to A. Yeah, I might do that actually. I think I'm going to bump up the Gamorreans to A, and I'm actually going to bump up the heavy troopers. And I think the regular rail guard's going to be our top of B class. And I want to put them. I actually would take them over. I would take them over regular royal guards. I think. Well, maybe. Let me think about that. Oh man, are they actually? Yeah, I'm trying to think about this. They don't have their command cards they usually have. There's not a ton of like relevant hunter smuggler stuff in campaign. They definitely do more damage than the heavies. It's just they're not as survivable. Is the problem. Like hidden is not a good defensive ability even if you were using it that way. Yeah, I'm gonna actually put them right above ISBs in B tier. I think they're not quite as good as Royal Guards. They just because Royal Guards again, that stun is what makes them useful. And the Royal Guards are a lot more durable than these guys, so that's a problem. Alright, moving on to the Jawas. So Jawas are quite a bit different from officers, which is what I would compare them to, just because they have that amazing surge for +2 and a surge for dealing a strain, which is really good. Like I mentioned, being able to deal strain to heroes is really good. A 2-point figure that can do that and can probably deal some good damage, really good. Plus it has that take cover, so if you roll like anything on the white die that doesn't have an evade, you just get a free +1 block. I think these guys are definitely very efficient, and I've heard very good things about people who play them in campaign as the Imperial player. Would I take three hired guns over 4 elite? Sorry, three Jawas, 3 regular Jawas over 4 elite hired guns. No, but I would take 4 Jawas over 2 Gamorreans, so I would put them up here in A tier. And then you have the elite Jawa. Gives friendly droids +1 speed, so it actually makes your regular probe droids like way more playable. Haggle is like, I don't like that. I just don't. I like to keep my threat like constant through the campaign, through the round. Excuse me, through the mission, and know exactly what I'm going to be spending it on from turn to turn. But those surge abilities are fantastic. They're just as good in campaign as they are in skirmish. And then again, you have that +1 block. But it's a single figure. It does give you more activations, but most likely he's just gonna die. But at 5 health, it means the rebels have to probably commit more than 1 attack to killing it. I don't think I like it quite as much as the regular. I would take them over elite gamos though, so I think I'm going to actually put it right underneath the regular in A class or A tier. Alright, moving on to Heart of the Empire. We're going to look at another massive figure here, which is the ATDP. So we finally made it. This is the massive figure best in class. This is just the best one you can get per points, and it's actually like insanely strong in the times I've used it. It has such a great health to cost ratio in addition to a defensive bonus. It has assault, so it can just perform 2 attacks, and it's not tied to attacking the same figure the way the tank is. Good surge abilities, a nice accuracy bonus, so it doesn't have to move to get that assault trigger. Charge generators is really fun. It kind of gives like a little halfway point for the rebel heroes, so definitely has that fun, flavorful factor to it. But mostly it's like a really hard to kill thing that occupies 6 spaces on the table and can just block things for you. Like it's so hard. You can forget about blocking a door, just blocking a hallway or like an entryway to from one room to another. This thing can prevent rebels from getting to the next, just moving through an open door or an open pathway. And it's so hard to get rid of. Like, there's no way the rebels are getting rid of this before like tier 2 weapons and upgrades. So I have this at A tier. I think it's definitely better than the Nexu. I actually think it's better than Elite Stormtroopers. I would take a ATDP over a group of Elite Stormtroopers every time. I don't know if it's better always than Jet Troopers or Dewbacks though, just because it is such a high cost. I mean, it's not that high, but it's like it's going to take up your entire turn most likely. But it's still very good. I think it's definitely can hang with Jet Troopers and Dewbacks. And next up, we're going to be looking at. Actually, let's skip that one, and we'll look at the Riot Troopers. So Riot Troopers, dealing strain is quite good, and they are very tanky for their points cost. 5 health plus a block token if you can activate them. Now, you won't always be able to do that. Unlike Skirmish, the rebels can definitely use their initiative to their advantage and kill these guys early before they can activate. But if you can activate them, 5 health for 2 points with a block token is very good. The regulars don't have a reroll, so that's something. But being able to convert 1 damage into 1 strain, very good. Very good in like as a control sense. Being able to stop the rebels from using their abilities is very strong. I actually would put these guys at A, the regulars. I don't think they're quite as good as the Jawas, but I would probably say they're better than Gamorreans. Just because that strain ability is so good. And then you have the elites for 7. The reroll is really good. Surge abilities are great. Auto weaken is so good. You have the same crowd control ability and shield ability, and then just good stats all around. For the elites, I think I would put these guys. I have to say they're right. They're probably actually I think they're better. I think they're better than Jet Troopers. Just being able to deal strain and weaken, like they're not rate monsters like Jet Troopers. They actually do useful things that slow down the rebels. So I would put these guys at the top of A tier actually. Riots are just so good. And then going back to the what are they called? Claudites. So Claudites are interesting. Why does it not show their forms? Oh, you know what? I can do it from here. So 4.6 health and a red-green on the regular, and then we can actually make... there we go. And so they have 3 forms. First one's Senator. You get to roll your attackable plus a yellow, and then for each surge you get power tokens. This is really slow for campaign, and also the randomness sucks. You could get 0 with this, and then if you're spending your time doing this, like you really just want to be trying to keep up with the heroes on the attacks. So next one, the Scout's okay. The Rifleman, if you can get into a spot where you can take pot shots at the heroes without being in any danger, the Scout is pretty good. And then the run you really want is the Street Rat, which is you get 2 movement points for free, so you're moving 6. And then one of the surges is you get to roll a red die and deal that much extra damage, which is just kind of crazy. Although usually it will be like a surge for +2 basically. So yeah, the Street Rat's really good. That's the one you usually want to take. How good are they? I mean, if they can attack with that Street Rat ability, the elites can hit pretty hard. I think the regular is just overcosted. I would rather definitely have 2 Jet Troopers for 4 points. And of course, I'd rather have 2 hired guns, but that's neither here nor there. I think it's definitely overcosted. I think the 6.1's better. You've got more health, so you're not as worried about getting killed in one activation. And and you're doing more damage because you have 3 dice instead of 2. But I think overall, I'd probably put the elite like low B tier. I think I would take it over. Like, yeah, it's probably better than the tank, but I don't know if it's better than the wing guards. And then the regular, I would put this down in C tier for sure. I think I would take it. I don't think I would actually take it over 2 officers. I'd take the 2 officers, and then probably would take it. You know what? I don't know if I'd take it over Bantha. I would definitely take 2 of these guys over a Rancor, probably. But I don't know. The Bantha is just really good at what it does, which is blocking, basically blocking movement. Alright, moving on. We've got the last one from Heart of Empire. We're getting there, guys. We're almost there. Sentries. So sentries are a lot of fun. The 6-point are actually, they're okay. They've got decent health, but you're probably going to lose 1 in 1 activation to medium level rebels. Multi-fire is actually really bad with these guys with just 2 attack dice, so you don't want to be doing that most of the time. But at least they have targeting computers, so that's nice. Mostly you'll be doing charge shot. So they're kind of average, honestly, the regulars. The elites are where it's at. Like, the elites are insane. They're probably the best figure at this points cost. For sure. They're better than any other 10 plus point figure in the game. Their multi-fire is just so good. Since they have the Surge for Pierce 2 and the extra die to facilitate it, like, if you have 2 Sentry Droid figures that just doing multi-fire every round, you're dealing so much damage to 2 heroes. You're just going to wound them, the heroes, so fast if they don't do something about it. And, I mean, they do have a lower health value, but if you can supplement it with, like, they're troopers, so you can put the trooper attachments on them to give them extra dice and more health. And I've just found these guys to be like absolute monsters and very difficult to race with the rebels, especially if you can get them in like a mid-level campaign mission. They are very good. So the elites, I'm going to give a pretty high grade. I would put them in A tier, and I would say I think they're definitely, I actually think they're top. I'm going to have to give them the top spot in A tier. I don't think they're broken just because their health is like not quite good enough for 5 points. But they're close. Like, I would say these guys are close to brokenness. They're not, the reason they're not broken like the hired guns are, even though they have similar effects, is the hired guns are just so cheap. They come out every round. There's nothing the rebels can do to stop that from happening. Whereas, you know, if they can kill at least one of these guys around, you might not be able to redeploy or reinforce each round. So that's why they're not quite S tier compared to the hired guns. And then the regulars, they're just, yeah, they're pretty average. I would probably take an elite Eweb over regulars, but I take them over. I would probably take them over heavies, but I would rather have 2 regular probe droids than a group of regular sentry droids. Alright, finally to Tyrants of Lothal. Almost there, guys. Death Troopers. So, Death Troopers are very good. The full detachment means you get to bring, I believe there's 2 of each in the box. So you get 2 regulars and 2 elites as 1 slot in your open groups, which is super good. And then tactical comms makes them really flexible in being able to chain activate and get that 2 attacks in an activation that I mentioned. Because even if you've got 3 death troopers out and the rebel heroes kill one of them, it doesn't matter which one they kill, they can still tactical comms with the other one. And then the elite being able to give that token, also getting the really good surges there on a red-yellow. Really, really good. And being a 7 health figure for 4 points, we know that's good, although it doesn't have any defensive bonuses. I would probably rate both of these the same, Just kind of depends on how much threat you have. I don't think they're quite as good as dewbacks. I don't think they're as good as ATDPs, but I think they actually are better than elite stormtroopers. I'm gonna put the elites. No, I'm gonna put the regular higher. I think the regular just is more flexible, and you can get more of them. Like you can get 2 of them for 6, compared to like 7 for elite and a regular, etc., etc. So these guys are good. And then finally we are on Lothcats. I actually didn't realize the regular had an auto pierce 1 for some reason. I just didn't, but the fact that they do makes them quite good, especially since with Pounce you're moving 7 spaces before you attack. They are cheap and they do very consistent damage thanks to that auto pierce 1. And they can attack from so far away. I actually think the regulars are quite good. Where would I put them? Like they're good, but they're still 3 health, 2-point figure, melee. That rolls a blue and a green, so they could get like not much damage, like one damage, pierce 1 is possible. I would put them probably. I think they're better than regular jet troopers, but I don't think they're quite as good as regular royal guards. Now, the elites are a different story. The fact that you have one like use fresh catch and then pounce, and then the other one is attacking with a power token and auto pierce 1. These guys are just super efficient. I think I would actually put them. I would actually say they're better than dewback, but maybe not quite as good as the riots or the jet troopers. Since jet troopers are rolling 3 dice, which is just better than 2 dice pierce 1, and then the riot is like dealing strain and weaken and all that. And these guys are just dealing damage, but being able to move 8 and attack makes them really scary for the heroes. Especially if you deploy them like far back away from them, they can be quite good. And I think that's it. Let me make sure you can actually see the screen. Yep. So there is my campaign tier list for deployments. I hope you guys enjoyed that. A bit of a long video, but usually the discussion generated is worth it. And hope to see you guys for the next video. Thanks.